What's everyone? Welcome back to Game Brigade. And today in the show, I thought it would be kind of fun to talk about the games that are coming to Kickstarter or GameFound that I am the most excited for. Every year, it's fine to kind of look in the future and be like, what is going to be coming out? What am I going to get excited for? And here I have compiled 10 games that I'm personally looking forward to, and I'm going to give you a little reason as to why. It doesn't mean necessarily I'm going to back them, because a lot of these games, we don't have all the information. We don't know what's going to be included with them. So obviously we got to wait till the campaign. But what I see right now is something that I'm very excited in. So let's dive into the first one, which will be here, God of War from CMON. Now, we don't have a lot of information from this snippet of website that we're kind of digging into. But I've played God of War. I've enjoyed the system and the game that was presented to me on the PlayStation. So I'm curious as to what we're going to get from CMON here. Now, kind of reading into some of the, read between the lines here, I can kind of give you ideas of what I might want to see and what I hopefully kind of get from this. The first thing is we see that it's going to be featuring the main characters, Kratos and his son, as they embark on an epic journey through the 9 realms, as they're going to be fighting some fearsome creatures and powerful gods. So my mental idea is like, okay, when I think of God of War, the thing that immediately comes to my mind is always gigantic bosses. Like, that's kind of the thing. Kratos is always fighting these overly grandiose bosses. So how are they going to implement that? But you're also going to have, you have mini minions and monsters that you fight along the way. So I'm kind of expecting a little bit of that. Down here, they say the whole goal of the game, our main goal as always is, does this feel like God of War? And I think the designers did a tremendous job in that regard. So again, looking at these two lines, I'm suspecting, obviously we're going to have minis, but I'm wondering if we're going to be having minis with some very large scale miniatures to be fighting against, as well as some sort of miniature monsters for us, to kind of scale up towards it. What kind of game would this be akin to? Maybe something like Cthulhu Death May Die or something like that. The only thing is how many playable characters are we going to have for the heroes, and what's that going to look like? Of course, it's a CMON game, so we're going to be loads of stretch goals, and they almost always load up playable characters on games like that. So I don't know how that'll work. So this one has me intrigued. Obviously, there's not enough information based on what we have here to really get a good grasp. I'm trying to read between the lines and see, like, what are they telling us, and what could it be? And that's kind of like what we're seeing here with Dying Light, the board game. Dying Light is also another video game based IP. This one is coming from Glass Cannon Unplugged. And Dying Light is the IP is surrounding a zombie world or the infected in the game, where people are trying to survive. And it really features a parkour-like gameplay element where you're going to be traversing different types of structures and buildings that you're getting around the different types of infected. Now, the game has an interesting element where there's a day-night phase, and in the nighttime, there's a specific type of infected that come out, the volatile. And I was wondering if that would be involved here. So I was kind of going through here. You can kind of see, I like these structures. They're showing some 3D elements, which kind of takes into that parkour. But as I was coming here, one of these awkwardly placed photos, I was kind of zooming around here, and I noticed up here, this guy up here, that is definitely a volatile mini. So they're definitely going to be involved in the game. There's going to be some sort of day-night cycle here as well. I'm not sure if this border up here is referencing that. And of course, this photo is crooked. But I was kind of going through trying to understand, like, what can we get from these photos? You can see that there are definitely walkers and infected on top of these buildings. There's definitely tokens scattered around, especially a lot of the tops of the roofs have some sort of token for you to either collect or interact with. So these are the things I kind of do when I'm looking at these games. I was also taking a look at the player board. You have a lot of dice on these player boards that you're going to be interacting with. And so I don't know, is it going to be like a dice management system game as you allocate dice to certain things? I'm not quite sure, obviously. Just trying to figure out what it is. But so far, I like what I'm seeing. It's going to be, a deciding factor when this launches. Now, Glass Cannon Unplugged did... what's the name of the game? They did Frostpunk, but they just did Apex Legends, which did not perform as well on their Kickstarter as I think they had hoped for. I thought they did a relatively decent job doing Apex. I'm not a huge Apex fan. I played it. I didn't enjoy it. But I'm curious how Dying Light will do. Are we going to see somewhat kind of a similar, play as we saw with Apex Legends? I'm not so sure. Luthier, this is from Haverson Games. You would probably know them from their Distilled game. And I didn't play this, but I was presented this to me at Gen Con. And I thought it was an interesting game. Now, I'm not a huge Euro gamer. I like the Ameritrash systems. It's kind of what, you'll see me talk about all the time. But I did like the systems that were presented here. Now, Luthier is going to take place in like the kind of the golden era of classical music. So you've got, instruments that are being perfected, and you've got the Bach and Mozart, those kind of artists. And in this game, you're going to be doing multiple different things. You're going to be like working with making a perfect instrument, maybe trying to hire the right composers, maybe trying to get the right locations. So there's a lot of elements going on here. But when I was being explained, I was like, this looks kind of interesting. It looks fun. I kind of would put this in a system like where I'd place Darwin's Journey kind of thing. But, I'm not a huge Euro fan, so I'm not so sure where I'm going to place this once I actually see the actual Kickstarter campaign and get an idea of it. But I was intrigued when I saw this at Gen Con, enough so that it's in my top 10 of games I want to take a look at. The next we're taking a look at here is 20 Strong Tangle Woods. This is from Chip Theory Games. Now, I have my 20 Strong. I have enjoyed 20 Strong. The biggest contention here for myself is that I'm not a huge solo gamer. So when I buy these types of games, I like them to be compact and easy to take with me, especially if I'm going to go on a trip. That's usually where I find these, is I'm going to go on a vacation or a business trip. I want to take some games I might be able to play in the hotel room. 20 Strong so far has been like the best fit for me in that regard because they're so compact and they're still pretty compelling games and difficult. What I like about Tanglewood, now we don't know much about where this is going to go, but you've got the art is great. First off, I love this art. I've already liked Wonderland's Wars art, and I enjoy this art. It's by the same artist, so that's really cool. But I also like the setting that this is going to be placed in. So Tanglewoods universe from Manny Tremblay, so Dice Thrones, Wonderland's War, Radlands. This is going to be a twist on some of the classical characters. So you're going to have villains like the Big Bad Wolf, or the Witch Queen, probably Queen of Hearts, stuff like that. I think that is really, really cool. And I think my biggest complaint with like some of the 20 Strong decks is like the theme. I don't really know. I'm big robots and I'm fighting aliens. I don't know. But these are kind of cool and they're kind of vibrant art, which I like. And I like the way that Chip Theory Games made the foilish, like kind of the cards look more interesting or definitely premium in 20 Strong. I can't wait to see what these would look like. We know the price point's probably going to be in that $60 mark, which is, in my opinion, pretty decent for getting 3 more solo games. So I'm pretty interested to see what this one's going to look like once it launches. Next, we have Damo, Battle for Japan. This is by Stone Sword Games. They just fulfilled Senjutsu Battle for Japan. I played this. It's okay. I definitely wanted more from this, and this is definitely a game that I feel like is going to be like almost a lifestyle game. To get the most out of this game, you got to really just play it a lot and get feel for all the characters and get a better understanding what you're going to be getting into. Wasn't for me. What I like here about what we're taking a look at, let's go one more back, Damo Battle for Japan, is this is going to be more of an area control war game with some Martin Wallace designs. You can see Martin Wallace here is an influencer or a designer for this game. Effectively, you are going to be taking on a clan of Japan, and you're going to be using different types of alliances and tactics and bluffing and strategy to try to become the most powerful daimyo in the region by eventually scoring your economy, your territory, your army size, whatnot. This has a lot of reminiscings of another similar system I have, obviously, which is Rising Sun. And I'm wondering where it's going to fall in between that. You can see each game is played over 3 turns, and you have the alliance phase, where you're going to be bidding for different types of alliances with your other players. You have the action phase, where you're going to be doing different actions. If we take a look at the action board, which I'm assuming this is the action board, it's this one here. It looks like there are a few that have unlimited actions, which I'm assuming this little unlimited sign here is any amount of players could take those actions. Otherwise, it looks like you have these squares, which means that there are specific or a certain amount of actions that can be taken. Also, you can see that there are some here that say 5+ players, so it'll be limited there. And I don't know if it matters order or who goes first. Obviously, because does the order first, does this yellow player get a bonus if they were the first person to place their thing? But that's going to be the way the game is designed, is you're going to be placing your action cubes to this location, and then after that, you will then do different things on the game board. I am not in love with the aesthetic design that we're seeing here. This is pretty... the colors are pretty poor to me. I think that's also a resounding statement from a lot of other people. The colors aren't the best. I think they could do great with this aesthetics design. And I think this is one of the most important aspects of the game, is you really need to get a capture and feel of this timeline. It's also when are we playing? Because the era of the daimyo and shogun is a very long time period of time. It's 800 years of reign that this happened. So when are we occurring within that region? I'm not so sure. If we go to the reviews, we kind of see what people are talking about here. Some people are saying that the turns are taking too long. A lot of people comment on the gameplay just being a long time, best with 5 players. So there's going to be a lot of question marks as I go into this campaign and we take a look at it. I'm curious to see what we're going to be, because I like the setting. I like the world. I like the theme. A lot of things are checking boxes for me, but of course, gameplay is always king. It's going to be what makes us play the game and over and over and over. So let's move on to number 2, which is Roth, which is such a weird name, Roth. Another Chip Theory Games game. So congratulations to Chip Theory Games for scoring multiple games on the list. Roth is interesting. Not a lot of information yet, but I like what we see here. Dive into the captivating realm of Roth, a memorizing midweight game that combines dice drafting, which I like dice drafting, and faction-driven area control. So I'm really kind of curious how this is going to work. An area control game coming from Chip Theory Games. So many of their games are cooperative in a sense. So it's kind of interesting to see them kind of stepping away from that cooperative realm a little bit and trying to see, okay, what can we do with this area control world? It seems like so many Chip Theory games are almost always driven from a solo experience, then stacked up and built up. So this is kind of a different take on their system. So I'm kind of curious where we're going to go with Roth. Next, we have Tiny Epic Game of Thrones. It's been a while since I've been super hyped up about the Tiny Epic series, but Game of Thrones is obviously an IP that historically I would say I love. Obviously, like most people, this Game of Thrones fell flat. I actually started feeling like Game of Thrones was falling flat as soon as season 6 hit. I thought season 6, 7, and 8 were just all poor, but 8 was obviously the worst. Game of Thrones Tiny Epic is going to be taking elements, if I looked at this right, if I was reading what people were talking about with the system, Tiny Epic Galaxies, and they're going to be using that system with a little bit of a twist, where you are going to be taking on one of the houses of Westeros as you try to become the most powerful, doing things... what's the term, where you're going to war, making alliances, backstabbing, doing Game of Thrones things. That's pretty much the thing. I do believe this also has a follow mechanic. If I saw here, yeah. So there's going to be a follow mechanic where someone's going to take an action and then you can follow along, which is kind of interesting. I haven't seen that too often lately, so it's kind of good to see some other people trying to work on that mechanic. So it's utilized a limited action dice mechanism to strategically choose your actions such as plot, whisper, event, march, and sail, and then other players will have the option to follow along with your actions. So that's that one. Tiny Epic Game of Thrones. Not a lot of information to take a look at here. No photos for us to take a look at the gameplay elements to get a better picture of it. But, I like Game of Thrones and I like the world that Game of Thrones comes from. So let's see if we can get something good from that one. The next one, if we hop over here to Reddit, we've got Resident Evil 4, the board gaming, coming to Kickstarter. This is also going to be from Steamforged Games, who currently has the Resident Evil IP. They just recently delivered Resident Evil, which is the third series of the Resident Evil board games that they've done. They started with 2, they did 3, now they have Resident Evil. I really wish that they would have released an expansion pack to Resident Evil. You have Resident Evil 0 and Resident Evil Code Veronica that use characters that were also featured in Resident Evil. Would have been a great, to expand upon that game, giving us more options and more gameplay. But here we are with Resident Evil 4. Resident Evil 4 is a vast change into what Resident Evil is. I don't consider Resident Evil 4 the same as Resident Evil 1 through 3 plus all the intricacy middle games. Resident Evil 4 changed into a more action-paced game, more fast, fluid movement, and also changed the kind of the origin of how the zombies worked, where they weren't like typical shambler like zombies. So how is Steamforged Games going to implement this system here with Resident Evil 4? It's not going to take the same mechanics that we've seen with the other Resident Evils, which is more of a dungeon crawler, search the tiles and whatnot. It's got to be something completely different. We have a lot more different types of enemies that are more movement. You've got the chainsaw guy. You've got the fast running at you villagers. Where are we going to be? Also, Resident Evil 4 featured Ashley, which was the girl you had to rescue, the president's daughter. How is she going to be implemented in the system? Is she going to have some sort of AI system where players are going to have to interact and move around? I'm not sure. So that's Resident Evil 4, the board game, and I'm curious what it's going to be when it hits. Dantes Inferno, we're coming up to the final 2. In Dantes Inferno, this is from Creative Game Studios, the same people who make Chronicles of Drenagor, which is one of my favorite games. Not top 10 worthy, but it's in the top 20 to 30. I really, really enjoy Chronicles of Drenagor. I enjoyed the system. I think there's some great elements there that are more unique, and I very much enjoy overall the creative design that the team has. Now, Dantes Inferno, I saw this at Gen Con. The booth was always packed when I went there. It was never a chance to actually get up and get a hands-on feel for the game. There was always 30 people crowding the thing, but I was able to kind of peek my head over and get an idea of it and get an idea of what's kind of going on. Now, my biggest hang up on this one, if it's a campaign style game, which I believe it is, we have so many campaign games. We talk about this. You got to have something that's really, really exciting for me to want to dive into a campaign game. Now, these guys have done this thing where they do terrain kind of builds up and it matters. So that's kind of interesting to see this again re-implemented in this system. Again, I don't know how good the overall gameplay is going to be versus all the other types of campaign games we have, because you're competing in a space with Oathsworn, Teneris, your own Chronicles of Drenagor, Sleeping Gods, Tainted Grail. There's so many other campaign games that you're going to be competing in the space. I'm curious to see what Dante provides. What is its hook? What is its thing that makes me want to dive into it? Because the space for campaign games is limited in a collection. And the final game is Avalon, the Riven Veil by Shadowborn Games. This is an area control game played with the Arthurian theme. And this was announced, I think, the day after CMON announced their Mordred. So everyone was like, oh, how weird. We're having 2 Arthurian area control games. I really am excited for this one. But it's mostly because of the pedigree behind the game. Jamie Jolly of Shadowborn Games has taken Oathsworn. He's the designer for Oathsworn. And when you play Oathsworn, when you're going through the systems, if you really appreciate the dedication, the time, the effort put into making the game a complete, solid experience for the players, you don't get that in many games. The best example that's most widely known is that I could give you would be something like Gloomhaven, where in Gloomhaven you could tell there was a lot of passion and effort to build out the universe, to give you unique items, to give you some very good interaction play between the different types of heroes you can play. It's not very common to get something that in depth. I think Oathsworn feels the same, where you could definitely tell that this was a passion project with a lot of effort and love put into it. And I think that Shadowborn Games has emphasized that with all of the projects they've done with the second edition of Oathsworn. And I'm hoping we're going to see the exact same kind of effort designed from Avalon, the Riven Veil. I don't see why they wouldn't. They've been putting a lot of time in this. I've heard rumblings about this game back in like 22 when they were kind of wrapping up Oathsworn and getting fulfillment going. So I know this has been in development for a long time. I'm sure it's going to be a great game. I'm super excited for it. We don't know too much about the system other than it's got some hand management, King of the Hill, area control. We'll see. But overall, just off pedigree alone, this game is going to be hitting my number one most anticipated game of 2024. So that wraps it up. We had God of War, Dying Light, Luthier, 20 Strong, Damo, Roth, Tiny Epic, Resident Evil 4, Dante, and finish it off with the Avalon, with the Riven Veil. A lot of bangers. There's even more games out there that are coming in 2024. I chose the ones that I'm most interested in because these are systems and games that I enjoy playing. And I thought you guys, if you're my audience, obviously you probably enjoy similar games. But I would love to know in the comment section, is there anything I missed? Is there anything I need to take a look at? Put on my calendar and make sure I have a deeper understanding of when these games are coming out. Let me know in the comment section down below. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. But as always, my name is Brian, and I'll talk to you very soon.